All right, well then let's just go ahead and get started with this. Welcome everybody to our webinar. Let's be frank, relationships and intimacy for men with spina bifida. And just want to say that the idea for this session was that we heard from a lot of men with spina bifida who felt like there was not a forum or a place where people could have address issues related to making friends or getting into relationships. So today we're super excited to have our panelists. We have Elizabeth Scriven, clinical psychologist out of the West Coast. And we have Jay Dashevsky. And Jay, remind me, I always forget where you live. Oh, you're in Arizona.
Yes, I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona. Yeah.
Very good. And Brian Malone, and you're in Texas.
Yes.
And Adam Sealscott in Ohio. And we also have Judy Thibodeau, who is with the Spina Bifida Association, as am I. I'm Juanita. And so you'll see from your Zoom control panel that you have the option to send questions, which is really the reason we're here, is so that you can send us questions. You can do it through the Q&A button. And that's really the best way, particularly if you want your questions to be anonymous. And then we will be monitoring that. And so yes, the Q&A, sometimes people send it through the chat function, which is fine as well. The chat function you cannot be anonymous in. So we welcome your questions. And so today we're going to be discussing obviously issues having to do with relationships. So one of the things that we would like you to think about as we move forward is, what are the biggest challenges that men face when making friends, whether it's a romantic relationship or friendship or not. And so with that, Elizabeth, maybe you can introduce yourself and begin your section.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a mental health therapist. I've been practicing mental health for about 8 years. And I'm also somebody who lives with spina bifida. So I kind of have the dual perspective. I'm going to cover just kind of briefly some general ideas around what a relationship is and how to be genuine in a relationship. And then we're going to talk briefly about spina bifida and how that impacts or maybe changes the way we approach the relationship. So the first piece is really about knowing yourself. What do you value? What do you like? What's important to you? There's online quizzes you can do to kind of help figure that out. It's thinking about your friendships and your relationships now and what you really like about those relationships is a good way to figure that out. And there's value card sorts and other things that you can use to kind of help you figure that out. But that's really, really important. One of the reasons it's really important because in relationship, you want to be able to demonstrate that you're comfortable with yourself, that you know who you are, you know what your disability is, you know what you can do, what you can't do, what you like to do. And being certain of that is going to help you because in relationship, we're asked to make compromises. We want to meet people in the middle. We want to kind of do a give and a take. And if you don't know where you can give and where you got to hold firm, that'll create a relationship difficulty down the road. Something else that kind of comes into this about knowing yourself is, where is your self-esteem and where is your confidence level? Self-esteem and confidence tends to attract people who have decent self-esteem and good self-confidence. So if you feel like you kind of lack those things or you need to grow them a little bit, finding things that you're good at is one really good way to do that. Being nice to other people, reaching out. I think of the episode of Friends where Phoebe's trying to do a good deed. Those are the kinds of things that make you feel good about yourself. Also mastering a new skill. So if there's a certain hobby you're interested in or a subject you're interested in, taking some time to learn about that thing and get good with it is a great way to build confidence and self-esteem. Next slide, please. So one of the key components of any relationship is good communication. So when you're living with spina bifida, knowing about yourself and knowing about how your spina bifida weaves in and out of your life, what times is it really important, when times is it not so important, is really important because people are going to ask questions about that, especially if you're doing the online thing. It's really kind of about when do you tell somebody, do you post a picture of yourself with your adaptive device, your wheelchair or your crutches or your braces in your profile? Do you mention something in your narrative of your profile about your spina bifida? Or do you talk about it when you get into that text messaging / phone call kind of a piece of the relationship? But being able to state clearly what's important to you, the things that you're interested in, helps, because it's really important that you have some shared interests and shared values in relationship. And it's also important that you have shared expectations. So when looking into a new relationship, are you guys going to be just friends? Are you hoping for a romantic relationship? Are you hoping to have a long distance relationship for an indefinite period of time? Or are you hoping to live in the same community and maybe eventually the same house? Having those conversations is really, really important. And in order to have those conversations, you kind of need to know where you stand on those things. Next slide, please. So those first pieces are all really important in any relationship, regardless of disability. However, when you're dealing with spina bifida, not only do you have the physical impairment that comes with that to different degrees for different people, you also have the impact of what's called executive function. So executive function, if that's a term that's new to you, is a set of kind of brain processes or thinking processes that allow us to make decisions. They allow us to direct our attention. They allow us to control our impulsive ideas. So just because I have a good idea right now in class doesn't mean I need to blurt it out right now in class. Our executive functions help us with working memory. So it's that short-term memory that we might use to remember our grocery list for an hour, or those things that we want to track in a conversation. So if I'm talking to a friend about what they like and what they don't like, how do I remember what they're telling me? So maybe I could ask questions later and have that back and forth conversation. It's also about higher order activities, such as planning or prioritizing an activity, weighing out pros and cons when you're making a decision, and your ability to solve problems. So what we know is that the Chiari malformation that some of us have, as well as hydrocephalus that 85% or so of us have, affects executive function to different capacities. So one of the ways that affects relationship in particular is social cues. Social cues are those things that happen between two people when we're communicating with each other that help us know what the meaning of that interaction is, or what the other person wants in that interaction. A lot of that is nonverbal. Most of the way we communicate is not through words. It's through our facial expressions. Am I smiling? Am I scowling? Am I thinking really hard? It's also about movement and what our body posture is doing. So if someone's backing away from me during a conversation, that's usually a pretty good sign that they need to leave, they need to excuse themselves. If I don't pick up on that and I follow them, that could create a problem in a relationship. So that the mix of social cues and executive function is really important. When we struggle with the executive function, we might struggle with those cues, but that does not mean there's not hope or we're not hopeless in that. So a lot of us, by the time we get to adulthood, have a sense of like some of our strengths and weaknesses. And we might know that we talk too much. I'm one of those, I talk too much. So all my friends I typically give them permission to say, if I'm repeating myself or if I'm talking too much, just like let me know and I will shut up and zip it for a minute. So recognizing that we have those behaviors that might get in the way and giving our friends or potential new relationship, romantic relationship or friendship, those folks permission to help us keep it in check can be a really helpful tool, both for us, but also for those friends. Tips around relationship and friends, like the biggest one, like I just said, is really about being aware of where you struggle and ask and giving permission to that other person to help, or offering them tools. If you already know what works for you, if you have concentration issues and you have a hard time focusing and you're like, squirrel, 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 and you're looking all over, having someone remind you to sit with your back towards the room rather than facing the room when you're sitting, at a restaurant can be really helpful. Other things that could be really helpful in starting friendships when you have executive functioning problems. Honestly, it's about being honest and knowing yourself, right? I'll kind of meander on that one too, maybe come up with some more later as I hear the guys talk. Next slide, please. So kind of to wrap my piece up, Spina Bifida in relationships is about being content with yourself and who you are, because when you have confidence, you project confidence, and confidence is attractive to people. So really just being able to be comfortable with your strengths, with your weaknesses, and just being who you are. Being aware that you don't have to limit your circle of friends or your circle of romantic interests to people with disabilities. There are far more people without disabilities in the world than there are with disability, especially if you're looking just in the Spina Bifida world. Interact with all of them. Make friends with a variety of people. You'll learn a lot about yourself and you'll learn a lot about other people. Also, making sure that you're in healthy and happy relationships. Looking for the people in your life that bring you joy rather than misery. Having a soulmate is kind of a romanticized idea. It's more about Hollywood and the movies, and it's definitely not the be-all end-all. Most relationship comes with a little give and take. It comes with a little conflict. The happily ever after and that soulmate idea that we see in movies and on TV isn't necessarily realistic. So looking just for those people that bring you happiness, bring you joy, make you smile. And those folks, and avoid those folks that create drama or conflict for you. So in the therapy world, I call those toxic relationships. A relationship is only as healthy as the healthiest person in the relationship. So if you find this new friend or this new romantic interest who makes you feel uncomfortable, who makes your anxiety go up in a not so Twitter-pated, but more of a stomach turning kind of a way, those are good cues that your body is telling you that that's not a healthy relationship, and you might want to kind of talk about that or create some distance between you and that other person. That's all I have for you right now. There's going to be question and answer time later. And as the guys talk, if you have any questions for me, feel free to direct your questions my way. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And so now here's the fun part, the other fun part where we have the panel of our panelists. And so here's where, we're just going to open it up just to be a discussion with our panelists. And we do see that there is one question, and we will definitely address your question. So all right, so let's talk about this first point. So what do you view as signs that the other person is interested in more than just commenting on whatever social media feed you have? And Jay or Brian or Adam, whichever one of you feels like you have a sense of that.
Well, my mind is right now going to social media because A, it's pretty much all over the place in this day and age, and B, we're in the pandemic times where it's really wise that we minimize our contact as we see fit, as we're the most comfortable. And so what I'm thinking about is Facebook has these different ways to react to posts. I'm just, instead of liking, like you could hit the love, that heart button, that love button, or the wow button. Personally, I don't like a lot of those emojis. That's my cue as to like what I'm telling you, that I won't do it because I'm not really a fan of them. Sometimes you will see either the loves or the wows. Also, lots of times you'll get direct messages too. Those are more, they kind of break that wall between just commenting and actually talking back and forth. Maybe they'll add, maybe they'll say, hey, my messenger, I don't like the messenger, what's your number, type of thing, like we're texting back and forth. That could be one that might be a little bit more like forthcoming, but still, that that's a good way too. But those are really the only technology savvy things that I'm thinking of for right now.
Okay, thank you. Brian, how about you?
Well, I'll piggyback what Jay said. I think, at least I've noticed in uh, my life, some of the social cues for that, for the other person being interested is, you know, they just come right out and tell you. They don't beat around the bush. They don't, you know, they really don't want to be friends at first. Um, you know, it's just, hey, I like you, you know. Now, whether you do anything about it is obviously up to you, but just them right out and telling you is one way that I think a lot of people would basically just tell you if they're interested, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Adam, so what do you think are some signs that someone might be interested in more than just what they see on the screen?
Yeah, so I think this comes down to a couple things. One of these I kind of want to preface with, don't feel the pressure of trying to take that next step in communication, whether that's sliding into their DMs, right, or necessarily trying to gauge if this person is going to end up being your husband or wife. Out of the gate, I think it kind of goes back to something that Elizabeth was saying, which is just putting yourself out there, getting to know different types of people, carrying on conversations with different types of people, and kind of take a step back and just open those floodgates for any type of communication. As far as something, or somebody commenting on your feed, and if you should take that next step in communication, I'm all for it, right? Send them a funny post, send an interesting news article, open yourself up, put yourself out there. I think that is a first step to kind of overcome a lot of things, including confidence, and also helps you kind of, which is our next question, kind of helps you learn and understand some social cues as well as you start having those conversations, and start engaging, more closely with people. And then from there, you can kind of gauge, well, is this person interested in me as a friend? Is it a love interest, business professional, whatever it is? You can start, taking those steps towards forming that relationship. That's all I got.
Well, thank you. Elizabeth, do you have anything to add, or shall we move on? No. So I thought we definitely have our questions, but I was thinking maybe we can go ahead and address a couple of the questions that have come in from our attendees. And one of them says, I find myself not desiring intimacy all that much, given some of my physical limitations. Is that normal? And is it something I can change? So, yeah, does anybody want to?
Yeah, I can jump on that. To answer your first question there, is that normal? Yes. I don't want you to go ahead and think that anything is abnormal, or normal, or it's not necessarily the bar that you should be seeing yourself at. There's thousands of people meeting across the country right now who are sex addicts, who are saying, am I normal? Is my behavior, normal? Which is essentially the opposite of kind of break that barrier. Hey, if it's normal for you, then it's normal for you. I don't think you should, set your par against anybody else. If you're not desiring intimacy all that much, then find what your desire is if it's not, if it's not sexual intimacy or touch, is it emotional connection? Is it, a new beer at your favorite brewery? What's your desire, and who can you share that with? So that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, and just to go back, that it is normal. Most of us with spina bifida have bladder and or bowel incontinence issues, and that can be embarrassing and intimidating. A lot of men with spina bifida have erectile dysfunction issues, and that can be intimidating. And so I would offer like the idea of talking to your doctor, or your guy's doctor or your gal's doctor or whomever, about what can you do to mitigate that. If it's erectile dysfunction, is it about taking a medication so that you function better? If it's incontinence, is it about just making sure you go to the bathroom before you try to have sex? Or is it about being comfortable enough to talk about those as issues and finding a partner that's going to accept you regardless of them?
Okay. Thank you. And Jay and Brian, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. You know, I was reading the last part of the question, and the question, the answer to that is, in my opinion, you only change that if that's something you want to change. I mean, you can't change it
Brian, I'm so
unless-
sorry to interrupt you for just a split second. Is it just me or other people having a hard time hearing Brian?
It's a little choppy.
A little bit choppy. I wonder, could you maybe get a little bit closer to the microphone? I wonder if that's part of the issue.
I'm using earbuds.
Oh, okay.
I see, that's what it is. Okay, all right, well, then go ahead. But yeah, just know that it's a little bit choppy.
You know, but I found that if I don't want to change it, I don't have to. So it's up to you as an individual. You know, I don't know exactly what your problem is or what your, thing is, but you can't change, on the spur of the moment. It's
No.
right. You can't.
So Brian, I'm so
Can't
sorry to
change the
interrupt
weather.
you. I'm so sorry to interrupt you again. Maybe let's move to Jay for just a second, and then maybe I can work with you just to see if we can address your audio issues. So, Jay, do you have any thoughts on that?
What I like about that question is it really makes me think. There's a lot to it. So I think it's a great question. I think that we all have areas where whether it's physical, neurological, any neurogenic bodily function things, we all have areas that we're concerned about. We're definitely aware of, which is a good first step, because that when the moment arises, comes in the conversation. Oh, I want to let you know about this. So I think it's really a matter of a comfort zone. I guess that's my best answer is that we all have these things that we try our best to deal with, try our best to live with. They're not going to be 100% perfect, but then again, what is regarding these issues, these elements. So I would say do your very best, which you already are, and just move forth in your best way possible.
Thank you. And we had another question before we move on with the ones that we have planned. Is the comment is that I get rejected a lot. Is it because I am in a wheelchair?
So I can take that one. I'm new to the dating scene. I was married for 8 years. Well, together for 9 years, married for several years. Back on the dating scene, so I can totally answer this question. Again, speaking for me personally, is it because I'm in a wheelchair? I'm just going to be very blunt and say yes. There can definitely be rejections because you are in a wheelchair, and that's whether you're a man, a female, a male, female, alien. It doesn't matter. You're not going to be, nobody's perfect for everybody. There are definitely going to be people out there who are going to, again, just to be blunt, and not date someone in a wheelchair. I think that's something that everybody in this webinar should just understand up, front and center. But that doesn't mean there aren't people out there. Like I said, I'm 31. I've been married. in a wheelchair my entire life since day one. There's people out there for everybody, and I know everybody in this panel and the people joining as well have had relationships out there. You are going to get rejected, but you just got to get back up, keep moving, keep looking for people, keep engaging. Like I was speaking about earlier, leave your door open. Don't shut anybody off. Hunger yourself for more conversations, different types of people. Keep engaging yourself and the people around you. You never know what kind of doors are going to open or what kind of people are going to walk into your life. But yeah, that's my experience.
I absolutely agree, and going back to what Adam said, what Elizabeth said, pretty much, Brian, pretty much everybody. You really have to harness your own character, like your own passions, your own drive, your own forward drive. What makes you you. The wheelchair, to some, sure, it'll be a I don't want to say problem, potentially a hindrance, maybe. Thanks to social media, I've seen lots of things where people they're all like taking pride in new appliances, new equipment. I got a new pair of wheels, I got a new chair, I got a new this and that, and this helps me do this enhances this. So in that way, I read those things and it makes me think of what people talk about with their cars. They take pride in their vehicles. So I think that there does go like a sense of pride. Once you go there, then it does become attractive. It's like, oh, okay, well, I could like that too. There was one time where somebody made a distinction between a power chair and a manual chair, and they're like, oh, the manual chair looks better, and I'm like, well, and I just thought to myself, kind of depends on your comfort zone and how you want to get around and how you can get around. But I mean, basically, like just you being you, and you really being passionate about things, and really just like able-bodied people without disabilities, they also are passionate about their own craft and their own things too. So basically, just be yourself. If they want to accept you, that's fine, and if not, well, then that's also the way things are too.
Thank you so much for that. And Brian, I think maybe your sound might be better now, possibly, once you unmute.
Yeah. I think, if you're rejected, then it's obviously not the right person for you. You need to find the right person, whether it's, whether you're male looking for a female or a female looking for a male, whatever. You need to look at, you need to look at yourself first, and you need to, how do I put this? You need to make sure you're okay with yourself first, because if you're not okay with yourself, then when you try to approach somebody to be a friend, or whether it's, you want an intimate relationship, whatever, then, then you're going to get rejected. So my advice to you would basically be, check yourself out first and see if you're okay with yourself before trying to pursue a friendship that you've never had before, or a relationship you've never had before. Because if you're not okay with yourself, it ain't gonna work.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have 2 more questions, but let's move on to ours. We can do that, and then we'll take the other 2 questions. Does that sound good to everybody? Or do you want to take the the questions that have come in from the audience first? It's up to you.
We can do the PowerPoint and then take
Okay.
the questions out.
Yeah.
And there might be a little bit of overlap in the answers now anyway, but so one of the questions, and Elizabeth was talking about social cues. How can you understand social cues? And along those lines, like again, on social media, because that's pretty much what we have right now because of the pandemic, is it okay to reply to every post that somebody makes that you might want to become closer to?
With the social cues thing, I've kind of approached the unfortunate situation that I'm wondering to myself, what isn't a social cue? And that probably is because I've seen a lot. I've become acclimated with a lot, both fortunately and unfortunately. I think a lot of it is because of not because of I've received it. So that's repetition, receiving the cues quite a bit here and there, but also immersion in things, you know, like for me, I'm just gonna talk about myself too. I'm a film buff, and in films you have all the different genres and all the different things where you get to see social cues being played out. So I see those in, you know, comedy and satire and in this and that, and all these like situational things. You then learn to see it within your social circles, you know, friends, whatever. I also think that you should be aware of reactions that you get from not only your own output, your own behavior, but also what are people looking like? You know, the way I was visualizing it too is like a road, and if you're driving down the road many different days, and then all of a sudden something seems different. You're like, wow, that stands out. Wow, that's different. How should I process that? How should I react to that? A social cue can be jarring. So that's kind of why, like I'm like, what does that mean? You know, one time I got one. I was asking about plans, and she replied, oh, okay, well, I'm busy this week, but how about next week, or next week, or next week, or next week, ... And I kind of was like, oh, that's it. That's a no. So that's, but I mean, I kind of, you kind of have to really think about things that are different, that are like out of the ordinary.
Cool. Very good. Anybody else have any thoughts on their experiences with social cues? If not, that's cool. We can move on to the next.
I'm good here. I think Jay touched on it really well.
All right, awesome. All right, we will move forward. And this might actually address some other questions that people have in the audience. How can I make a long distance relationship work, whether it's in another state or across town? And then this is a really big topic because there's so much involved, you know, and there's like pros and cons to being, you know, to it being long distance, and like there's some things you can't change, etc. So panelists, this is all you. Brian, do you have any thoughts about long distance relationships?
I do. You know, I'll make a long story short. I just recently got out of one, and it was because of the distance. So I would just say something I've learned, and that might help somebody wanting to be in a long distance relationship, is be friends first, which is not something I did. I just jumped right into it. But be friends first. Make sure you know that this is something you want. Because if you have the intention of possibly pursuing a relationship, you need to make sure that you and the other person, whether able-bodied or not, is able to maybe relocate from their state to the other state, or do they have reasons that they cannot? And right there is going to be your cue. And if you're friends first, you should know it within the first maybe, I don't know, year of friendship. You know, I didn't find out till 4 years or a year and a half later that it wasn't going to, because she had the intention of basically moving, one of us moving, and neither one of us could do it. So just make sure that you're in it for the right reason and that it is indeed something both of you can handle.
And earlier, Elizabeth, you had mentioned also expectations.
Mhm.
And where do you think that fits into this?
Oh yeah, it totally different. So with long distance relationship, I think it's about two things. It's about whether or not you are comfortable with the idea of a long distance relationship. And then the expectation piece is what Brian just touched on. So knowing what you expect in a relationship from the beginning and having those conversations. So if you expect this to always be a long distance relationship and you're okay with that and you get something out of it and it feels comfortable to you and it feels healthy to you, then great. The expectation is that you're going to end up moving in and living in the same community or in the same home. That's something to talk about too, because if that's not feasible for either of you for either reason, then do you really want to put in the time and energy into that long distance relationship?
Thank you. Anybody else have some thoughts on Adam? You mentioned that you're kind of like back on the dating scene. Do you have any thoughts on the long distance thing?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, they both Elizabeth and Brian touched on some good points. I think it's important to remember that no matter what, long distance relationships are difficult. You know, communication becomes everything at that point. Just you can't Netflix and chill. You can't go to the movies. You can't go out for dinner, right? So yeah, I mean, communication is key. Knowing each other's schedules is huge, especially when it comes to building trust. But that's about all I've got to add to that.
Okay, thanks. And
You
Jay,
know,
do you have?
and I will just quickly say, I believe as well that it goes back to what Elizabeth said in her presentation. You got to know the cues. You've got to know what they are, because there are going to be cues out there. And if you don't know them, you can miss out on something really phenomenal.
Thank you, Brian. And so Jay, did you have anything to add?
I don't really have all the experience when it comes to long distance, but what I'm likening it to is the ones that are local. You know, like you have those tactics still apply. You have to employ patience, respect, reciprocity, communication, understanding. You know, all those, because if any of those break, then your trust is kind of on shaky ground, and things kind of fall apart like that.
Okay. Thank you. Got a message from somebody saying that the chat function is disabled. I'm not sure about that because we're able to use it, but if anybody else is having problems with that, you can maybe just let me know in the questions function. So are you guys cool if we move on to some attendee questions now? Let's switch it up a little bit. All right, so then the first one on the list is, would it be appropriate to disclose your disability on a dating app?
I think a lot of people will give you different answers. There is no textbook one. If you were to ask me that 10 to 15 years ago, I would be on the fence. I would be like, well, maybe not. As I've gotten older, I've kind of gotten more daring, kind of gotten more like, not too much, more assertive and more like, okay, this is me, deal with it. I'm gonna be who I am. You're gonna be who you are. But I would say, like, as of right now, 2019, 2020, I would say yes, because it's going to come out regardless. There is no switching it off at any given time. It's there. And it's going to be there. So you could, briefly touch on it on your opening text or your profile. Do what you want. I wouldn't overdo it, but I mean, and this is coming from a guy who has kind of been iffy about online dating to begin with, but still, I like honesty. I like honesty and being out there and being genuinely yourself.
Cool. Thank you, Jay. Anybody else want to jump in and
So what I do when I'm doing the online stuff is I make sure one of my profile pictures, or a couple of them, show my wheelchair, but I don't put my disability type in anywhere in my profile. And I do that for two reasons. One, if you look through my whole profile, it's really obvious that I use a wheelchair. So my hope is that the guys are doing that. The other thing is the Google thing, and I don't want people Googling spina bifida because it's a whole continuum with a wide range of things, and they're going to read things that don't apply to me and maybe make assumptions that aren't correct. So I when I first start messaging with them, I'll be like, hey, did you see all my profile pictures? I'm in a wheelchair, right? And then that kind of opens the door. First, it makes sure that they looked at everything and know what they're getting themselves into. But second, it opens the door for a little bit of that conversation. So that's how I handle that one.
good tip. Thank you.
I was just thinking about it while Elizabeth was talking. And, I would say, on the Googling spina bifida thing, they're going to Google what they want. By you putting your disability or a picture on your profile, that's not going to stop them from doing what they wish. And if they wish to Google spina bifida, hey, I say go for it. But when they hit you with those questions, and they're going to at some point, then that's when you can correct them on some things that maybe they missed or got wrong or whatever. But, you can't stop them from Googling whatever they want, but you can correct them when they approach you with that question.
I'm going to go ahead and take another question that's very related to this notion of, like, at what point do you disclose that you have spina bifida? And it's actually one of the questions that we were going to address later anyway. But this question that just came in was, when do you think it's appropriate to disclose the bathroom issues that come with spina bifida? Do you do it during the dating stage or after you guys have dated for at least some months or a year?
I think be upfront. I kind of was tinkling with that question myself for quite a while, and I think just be upfront, especially if this is somebody that you intend to possibly be in a relationship with and possibly long term. Then be upfront, because they're going to ask you eventually, themselves. And if you're not upfront, if you maybe, I like to call it little white lie, if you will, then they're not going to want to have a relationship with you, or they're not even going to want to be your friend because you aren't completely honest. So I'd just say, be upfront, be honest.
And maybe just to touch that on a little bit more, I don't know if Jay or Adam want to touch on this, but I'm wondering if maybe part of the question has to do with, you know, because it is a bathroom issue and like it's not necessarily something that people just talk about all the time, but like at what point or like in what setting or how might it be appropriate to just sort of raise that and do like you just said, Brian, be upfront about it, you know, be upfront about it, but maybe like, do you have any tips on like what's a setting, like a good occasion to do that?
Well, you know, that depends.
Wait, I'm sorry, Brian, just 1 second. Were you going to say something, Jay?
I think you've got to really use your spidey sense, because I mean, like there are some ones that are obvious, such as like not over a dinner date, or maybe not like in the movies where people sit in front and behind you. If you can remember what a movie theater is nowadays, but I think it will come regardless. But I think you do have to really get to know the person first, really sense that person, sense if it is appropriate. Because you're with that person, then the setting also plays a character too. You're with the person, you're also with the setting. So really, but then again, it's that person that can walk out on you. Not so much the setting. So really gain a sense of what's this person like. Do I really like this person? You know, do I see the future? Do I see a future? Do I see any semblance? So, because, you know, it'll come whether you talk about it or what if there's an accident, you know? So it's a tough question that really has lots of answers, lots of opinions, but I would say just really be cognizant of what's out there.
Thank you. Elizabeth, did you have any thoughts on that, or Adam, before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I was gonna piggyback off of Jay. Made some really good points. I don't think there is a definitive answer. I think a lot of it just comes with really a couple of things: your preference and how forthcoming you want to be with bathroom issues. The other thing that I think does come into play and maybe isn't spoken about enough is your level of dependency. How much your bathroom issues actually do affect your ability to use the bathroom and the people around you in those close relationships. Just to go off of my experiences, I've been in a relationship where it was addressed after a few months. I've been in relationships where it never came up in conversation. So it really, again, it just depends. A lot of this kind of just goes back to, knowing that person that you're with, learning them, and Jay touched on it as well. And I just want to reinforce it. I don't think anybody should be scared to disclose this information with fear of somebody walking out on you. If they're at the movies with you, if they're at that dinner date with you, and they're well aware of your disability or your spina bifida, a couple bathroom issues isn't going to make them run out the door. So I think we should all be cognizantly aware of that. It's not something to be scared of. It's something everybody lives with, right? There's, Matthew McConaughey probably has IBS, right? It's maybe he doesn't bring that up. I'm kidding. I don't know if that's true. I probably shouldn't say that. But I don't know if he brings that up with his wife, or he brought it up with his wife on their second date. So it's something just to kind of gauge for yourself, learn the person you're with, understand what your abilities are and how much that affects your bathroom tendencies. But that's my 2 cents.
And I will say this, because not every friendship or every relationship you're going to have is, you're going to be able to see the person like as in the distance thing. So you got to think about, what, in what setting am I going to tell the person? Am I going to send them an email? Am I going to call them on the phone? Am I going to, do a Zoom? Am I going to Facebook? What? Because I can't see that person. I'm not sitting next to that person in a movie or at dinner. So you got to think about those too, because it's not all going to be the same.
Thank you. So we have another question that also touches a bit on what I think Elizabeth had addressed. Are there good first steps to building confidence?
Yes and no. I mean, testing the waters, definitely testing the waters, taking risks, taking healthy risks, building confidence in yourself, in what you do, and liking what you do. People like to hear, you know, good things. They like to hear, oh yeah, you have a passion for something, and even if it's not like somebody else does too, you still want to be comfortable in your own skin as much as possible with what you're doing, with how you go about living your daily life. Nothing's going to be perfect, but I would say, like, test the waters, test the waters, test the waters. Know when to quit. Absolutely. Know when to kind of like not push too much, but still, you know, be yourself, but be out there, type of thing.
Yeah, extremely well said. Just to pick up off that, and it kind of goes back to the last question of when you bring up these things that you can't do, right? What with your disability, with spina bifida, when it comes to relationships, everybody wants to know, like, oh, like, how does this affect your life? How does this stop you from doing the things that you want to do? I think the first step to building confidence is recognizing and talking about and chasing the things that you can do. And that doesn't matter if it's, I don't know, like reciting the entire song of Bohemian Rhapsody, like whatever. It doesn't matter. Just things that you can do that maybe somebody else can't do. Maybe, you know, maybe you have some bathroom issues, but maybe you excel in another area. I think it's important to focus on those because, you know, especially when it comes to new relationships, they want to know, like, well, what are your limitations? What is the absolute furthest that you can go physically? And I don't mean sexually. I just mean in general. You know, what can't you do? To gain confidence, you focus on what you can do and what you have done in the past and what you plan on doing in the future.
Elizabeth, oh, go ahead. I was going to ask you to chime in.
Yeah, so I love what Jay and Adam has just said, and I want to just add that confidence takes time. It does not happen overnight. It comes with repeated experience, where you're learning what works and what doesn't work for you. And part of being comfortable with yourself and having confidence with yourself is being just as aware of what you're good at as what you're not good at. But knowing that you have the skills to deal with those things. So when you have an incontinence episode, do you have the skills to deal with that and to handle it? When you encounter a bunch of stairs, now you can't get into a building, do you have the skills to, like, confidently solve that problem or find a workaround? So it's not just about finding what you're good at, it's about acknowledging what you're not good at and giving yourself some credibility and some time to get comfortable in your own skin. That's a process. It does not come overnight. And if you're really struggling with it, you might want to ask your doctor about counseling. That can always be helpful.
Thank you. There was another question as well. And, you know, I just want to say, wow, we have tons of questions and we have like 3 minutes left. We haven't gone through our slides, but I think it's important that we actually go through our questions that people have submitted. And one of the ones that we just also got was, if you are a person, if you have spina bifida and you're in a relationship, have relationships been a bit more complex because someone in the relationship has spina bifida?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's like no two people are alike, but no two relationships are alike. I mean, it could run anyway. You know, you could have a good one or a not so good one or a this or that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, all relationships are complex. Does somebody in that relationship having spina bifida add to that? Potentially. But I don't think by any means that would be at the forefront. You know, people unfortunately get divorced married and divorced all the time. Like I said, unfortunately, and that's not because every single one of those relationships has somebody with spina bifida. And I'll leave it at that.
And Brian, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Oh, I totally agree with Adam. I've seen, tons of divorces, I've seen tons of marriages, and a lot of them, not all of them, have been somebody with spina bifida, but some of them have. So, I know it works, and I know it doesn't work. So it's just up, I guess, to the individual couple.
Okay. Thank you. So our hour is almost up, and I'm going to ask the panelists. We didn't address this before, but if you are willing to maybe spend a few more minutes to cover this? If you have to go, I get it. But if you're willing to stay on, awesome, then we can keep going. And cover some of these we've already touched on. I think that we touched on, and tell me if you disagree, this first bullet of how do I tell an able-bodied love interest or someone I'm interested in who also has spina bifida, that I have spina bifida. And I think we've covered that to some extent. We also, somebody else also asked about this notion of, is it easier or harder to connect with a person who has spina bifida versus a different, well, actually, no, this one we haven't. Is it easier or harder to connect with a person who has spina bifida versus a different disability? Kind of answered it maybe, but still, maybe, do you guys have thoughts on that?
I would probably give the same answer that I gave last time. It's going to be different each time. There is no right or wrong answer. It's good to go with who you want to go with, but it's probably going to be a matter of preference.
Okay, cool. And
I just want to say, again, it's up to the individual's personality, and up to them as individuals. So, if you find it easier, hey, go forth and do what you're going to do. If you don't find it easier, then maybe that's not something you need to look into.
okay.
Well, and we connect with different people in different ways. So I love being in a group with people who have spina bifida or spinal cord injury, because we all have very similar experiences with disability. And you could talk more freely about disability with people who have like disability. I have some amazing conversations with people who are on the autism spectrum, because they're just kind of fun and quirky and can be really intelligent and know a lot about certain things that I know nothing about. So I connect with them on a way that's very different. And that's okay. We all need different kinds of connections to be well-rounded and healthy.
Oh, awesome, thanks. And what about this question about boundaries, about expecting and accepting boundaries when somebody wants to ask you personal questions?
I think boundaries are very empowering to set up, and they really allow people to take each other seriously. And if somebody doesn't want to, then that kind of says something. It's like that unspoken truth, sort of. But boundaries really add to the maturity, to the communication, to the seriousness of everything. Really, they're a good booster, that moves things forward.
I like that. Adam or Brian, any thoughts on boundaries and personal questions?
Absolutely.
Boundaries are important. You got to have them. You can't just move. You can't just move forward. You got to know when to stop and how to stop. So they're important.
Cool. And Adam, Brian beat you to it, so go for it.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was just going to say, as far as boundaries, it kind of goes back to our point of, how much should we disclose about a disability on a dating app, as well as disclosing, bathroom issues. I think again, expect, you should go into these scenarios expecting these types of questions. And number one, be sure you're not going to get offended. If you think you may get offended by that, or you have in the past, then maybe it's a situation that you just fundamentally aren't ready for to be dating. Because unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on how you look at it, those questions are going to come. And then to Jay's point as well, setting that boundary, you don't need to be opening the floodgates and just sharing all the information about you and your disability. That's not healthy in any budding relationship. So setting those boundaries is absolutely important. It's going to give you the power and the confidence to then kind of continue with that conversation and potential relationship.
And just a thought, as we were preparing for this webinar, one of the things that kept coming up is that this is true of anybody in any relationship, having boundaries about, being prepared to, like, how are you going to be okay with people asking you personal questions or not? And just sort of being aware of yourself and your needs. But anyway, I'll move on to the next question. Oh, that was it. We finished our prepared questions, our prepared points. So thank you so much for that. Does anybody have any other things that they'd like to say before we close today? We still have time to submit any more questions if anybody in the audience has anything, questions or comments. Would you maybe like to see something like this done again? Sort of like creating a similar forum to have these conversations? You don't have to answer now, but if you want to, you can. You can always send an email to me. But I'll let our panelists say if they feel like they have anything else to add.
I don't. I just want to thank everybody for coming. The questions were awesome. It makes me think as well, and I appreciate that a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you all for coming, and also for good questions. They were really awesome, really thought-provoking, really stimulating, and definitely keep them coming, because this is going to be a topic that pretty much goes on and on and on in our individual lives.
So yeah,
I just wanted to say, again, guys, thank y'all for joining us. I feel this was really informative, and especially, hopefully not just for y'all, but for us as panelists. I know some things were brought up that I hadn't thought about, that I'm going to give some serious thought to. So again, as Juanita said, if you have any other questions, send her an email and she can find the right person to answer your question, and we'll be happy to answer it.
oh, thank you so much, Brian. Yeah, you guys were all awesome. And Elizabeth, thank you so much.
This has been great. For those of you out there who came, thank you. And let's keep coming back. We got to keep these conversations alive. Adults with spina bifida are a relatively small population, but we're only going to get bigger. And we need community. If we don't have this community, I know for me, I need this. And I would guess that most of us do. So let's keep coming back and keep talking.
Yeah, it was awesome. You guys are all fabulous. I'm so excited. Oh, wait, we have one more question. What's this question? Oh, okay. We do have a question. I don't know if you guys want to take it, but I will ask it, and then you guys can decide if you still have time. The question is raising a family possible? I think I know the answer to that, but.
I have no experience yet with that, but my answer is, why not go for it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're able to, whether that's have an actual baby, adopt, foster, whatever it is, can you have a family? Absolutely, for sure.
I know several women who have carried pregnancies to term, and they're healthy babies. Just because you have SB doesn't mean you will pass it on in your genes to an unborn child. You could, but it's not super likely.
And I will just say this: I personally have 3 friends that I know personally, and all 3 of them are in wheelchairs with spina bifida. One of them's husband is as well, and they all have kids. Some of them have 2 kids. So yes, it's very possible.
Yeah, and I'm just responding to, well, we have, so if you check our YouTube channel is what I was trying to type, but I can't type quickly enough. So if you go to Spina Bifida Association's YouTube channel, we have 2 webinars on becoming a parent with spina bifida. So it presents the option biologically, and it shows you why it is biologically possible. But we also have the option, it also presents the option of doing it through adoption. So, so the question is, you know, for sure it's possible, and there are different ways around it. And I'm going to send you my email. Actually, my email is here in this last slide. I'm Juanita, and you can send a question either to Judy or myself if you have any other questions. And like Brian said, we will direct them to the right person.
And we will be offering in early 21 a men's sexual health webinar that may help to further answer the issue of, address the issue of parenting and how you might do that.
Yes, that was going to be this webinar, but many people said, you know, you probably need to do something about making friends and relationships first. so that's what that was. Oh, and somebody actually also just another question just came in. I was wondering how they wish their parents brought them up with relationships. So the question of like what the parents' role was in and helping them build relationships.
My parents were very supportive and encouraging in that I just went and played with my brothers and sisters and the neighborhood kids, just like my brothers and sisters did, doing what I could. Sometimes that was climbing trees or the jungle gym, getting stuck in the middle of the jungle gym a couple times. Sometimes, you know, it looked a little different. But like most kids and parents and teenagers, we didn't really talk about sexual relationships because that was just uncomfortable and wonky because your parents shouldn't say the word sex in front of you.
Okay, very good. All right, well, everybody, thank you so much. And again, here's our email address. If you have any questions, you can always submit them and I will send them to the panelists. Thank you, everybody, for your time. And I hope you have a good rest of the day, whatever time zone you are in.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Have
Thanks,
a great
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.